Hello, this is a Green Report, Rappler show on the environment and the stories of people whose decisions impact the world around us. I'm Iya Gozum, and last year our team went to Northern Samar to tell the stories of fishermen contending with issues of overfishing, illegal practices, and big operators. Joining us today is Michelle Abad, Rappler reporter covering labor and women's rights. Michelle led the team that talked to the fishermen from Samar. Welcome to the Green Report, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Pretty good.
Okay, so maybe let's start with you telling us your experience about leading the Rappler team in Northern Samar, talking to fishers, spending a week, di ba? Parang halos isang linggo kayong nandun.
Correct. So, it was, we wanted to be as authentic as possible, no? Kasi 1 week din yun, di ba? Ayaw namin masayang yung trip. Gusto namin makausap ng as many fishers as possible na iba-iba sana ang kwento. Di ba? Mahirap din yung, halimbawa, kumausap pa ng maraming fishers, pero same lang naman yung kwento nila. So, the way we wanted to do that was, pumunta kami ng iba-ibang coastal towns. Like, kung makikita sa story, it was not just Allen, it was Victoria, San Isidro, and San Vicente, which is another island town. And para din makita namin yung respective situations ng mga fishermen doon. And so, we talked to not just fishermen, but we also spoke to their families. Meron din kami mga kinausap na mga asawa ng mga fishermen, ng kamusta yung buhay ng, halimbawa, kasi everyday, di ba, mornings or evenings, yung mga fishermen nilang asawa ay lalabas, di ba? So, hindi nila nakakasama. So, kamusta yung buhay na mag-isa ka lang sa bahay for most of the time kasi ganito yung nature ng trabaho ng asawa mo. So, we wanted to get that perspective. Tapos, ginusto din sana namin na kumausap ng mga anak, but then it wasn't readily available. So, we had to adjust din sa mga ganon. And then, I would say na siguro highlight din ng trip namin yung we spent 24 hours with this fisherman na alam namin gusto na maging main character or bida sa documentary. So, wild yun. As in, sinabi naman na sa amin the night before when we met the guy na magsa-start sila ng fishing trip nila at around 2:30 or 3 a.m. So parang sabi niya na yung call time namin in the meeting place na malapit lang naman was 2:30. Okay. So parang sinubukan din namin na matulog ng maaga. Pero alam mo yung, you know, there were and there were like feelings din sa team na parang, naka-pressure to, dapat we should be able to pull this off. So, ayun, parang medyo konti lang ang tulog, and then 2:30 na, nakapag-meet na kami. And then, yun, so nag-gather na ang team, but at that time, hindi pa sumisipot ang fisherman na nakausap namin. So, kinakabahan na kami. What if wala yung bida na to? Kasi gustong-gusto namin siya as our main character, or one of our main characters. And then, yun, dumating naman. And then, so yun, nag-start na yung full day namin of 24 hours na 4 a.m., 5 a.m., andun na kami sa bangka. It was dark. Wala pa yung sunrise. And parang iniisip namin na ito pala yung araw-araw ng mga mangingisda. And it's not something that we see every day. So it was good that we were able to experience that. And then that was just only their first fishing trip of the day. Meron pa siya ng hapon or gabi for sardines naman. Kasi yung sardines, hindi sila nangingisda ng sardines in the morning. So, dun pa yun mamayang hapon. And then, so we were able to rest naman a little bit during the day. Pero syempre, work pa rin. Meron kaming mga kinakausap pa rin. And then, nung nag-start yung second fishing trip, 5 p.m., and then it was hours into the night, yung nag-antay kami with them na ang bilis mawala ng net into the water ng mga 5:30 p.m. Tapos inangat nila ng 8:30. Tapos naalala ko, yung pag-pull up nila ng net ng sardinas ay mas matagal kaysa yung nakalubog yung net sa ilalim ng tubig.
Yung pag-pull up mismo? Mas matagal siya?
Mas matagal siya.
Pag-aantay ng, okay.
As in, yung nasa ilalim siya ng tubig mga 2 hours. And then, yung yung paghatak nila sa net, nasa 3 to 4 hours.
Really?
Yes, and like, as in tuloy-tuloy.
If you haven't experienced that, ako, nasa isip ko, parang mas matagal yung you're catching the fish and then pagka kukunin mo na, mas mabilis na. Akala ko.
Yun din yung assumption ko eh. But then that's when we were finding out na parang, as in tuloy-tuloy siya. Kasi mahirap din dun din namin na-realize kung gaano kahirap yung pag-fish ng sardines kasi yung manual na kung ilalabas mo yung net, one by one mo siyang itatanggal. So they did that for hours on end. So talagang kailangan nila maraming energy just for that.
Yeah.
They ended just before midnight. So parang nakipagkwentuhan kami sa fishing crew captain, na kumusta yung pakiramdam. And of course, it was a good problem to have for them. Na kahit napagod sila, marami silang huli at uuwi silang masaya sa pamilya. So after that, hinatid kami sa accommodation namin and we got there at mga 3 a.m. na. So imagine that was like 24 hours talaga na ano.
Yeah.
But
it was a good day.
It was a good day.
And that's what you wrote in the story, right? So for context for the watchers, for the listeners, so Michelle and I came out with a series of reports on sardine fishing and fishermen contending with big operators, the issue of the 15-kilometer boundary. So, sila Michelle yung nagpunta doon and I was there to help write it for the context, para maglagay ng context. And naalala ko, yung unang story na nilabas namin, yung first part noon, si Michelle nagsulat, ang haba nung description. She parang yung sense na nakuha ko was she was really trying to capture the experience. You were really trying to capture the experience of being with the fishermen for almost 24 hours, waiting long hours in the early hours of the morning, throughout the evening. Tapos yun yung na it was a good day. It was a good day na naabutan yun na ganun kaganda yung and yun yung na-film nyo na kasama nyo sila. So, this isn't really normally covered by your beat because you cover labor, women's rights, children's rights. So, ikaw, paano ka nag-prepare for the coverage and while on field and writing the stories, ano yung nakita mong parang kung saan nag-overlap yung beat mo and itong beats ng environment and agriculture.
Right before that, add ko lang yung sinabi mo na, di ba, it was a good day.
Yeah.
But sinabi nila, kinwento nila sa amin that for the past 2 to 3 days, wala silang huli.
So, baka kay Lucky Charm.
So yun, parang nisip din namin, hala, what if walang huli sila today? Anong film natin? Anong storya natin? Of course, storya pa rin yun, di ba, na walang huli. But then, di ba, parang kung iisipin mo din from a visual perspective, parang, ang sad, walang isda. But yun, it was a good day. But then, yun nga, that's just to make a point also sa documentaries na just because may mahuli yung camera crew ng isang araw na magandang huli, doesn't mean that it's always the same. Yeah. Right. So, going to your question. So, totoo. This was, personally, since I cover women's rights, labor rights, OFWs, this was something that I was not used to at all. Yeah. So, it was a lot of reading. Nung sinabi sa akin na, dapat kasi sama ka eh. But
things happened last year.
So, yun, when sinabi sa akin na ako yung sole reporter na pupunta, I had to read a lot. I had to make sure that I was acquainted with the topic at hand. Para din, di ba, hindi naman pwedeng wala kang alam, di ba, kapag pupunta ka sa field. So, I prepared by reading, but I also understood na, and also, din pala, nag-pre-interviews na ako sa mga fishermen and yung mga ibang stakeholders doon. Para din meron na akong idea na, kasi you're not always going to get the best or most authentic information just by research, diba? It matters din na meron kang preparation by speaking to the people that you're going to meet before you get there. So, yun, nag-pre-interviews. But even with all of that, syempre meron pa rin pressure or anxiety na baka hindi ko pa rin magawa ng justice to kasi hindi ko siya expertise. But, I just, meron naman akong support system, nandiyan ang environment cluster.
Wow.
Meron ganong support and there was always, from the office, palagi may makakausap, palagi may makakonsult. And then, I also wanted to own it myself na, syempre, yun nga, I'm coming from this background of looking at social justice lenses in labor rights and women's rights. Nung una, syempre, yung first beat ko kasi was women's. So I thought, how were the women affected in this type of situation? Kamusta yung mga asawa? And dapat talaga meron tayong ma-interview na asawa and how she's handling or how will she handle if kung sakaling magkaroon ng mga ganong proposals. So, And yun din. And I also wanted to compare yung mga workers na nami-meet ko dito, na halimbawa yung service workers, yung mga drivers na nami-meet ko sa public transportation. How can I compare yung mga alam ko dito sa city sa mga fishermen na nagtatrabaho din naman sa probinsya. So, yun, parang lagi ko din iniisip na may marginalization na nangyayari from kahit saan ka pa, kahit ano pang worker ka, kung ginagawa mo yung blue-collar work or yung mga minimum wage work or yung mga low-yield work, there will always be a chance for you to be marginalized. So yun yung lens na naisip ko. And then when we were doing the interviews, and there was this one interview na yung head ng alliance ng LGUs who said that where is the social justice kung sakaling magkaroon or matuloy yung proposal na papasukin yung mga commercial fishers sa municipal waters. Where is the social justice in that? And so parang yun yung naging guide ko din na it's still relatable in what I do. And nakita ko din yung overlap dun sa fishery sector na kapag meron ganitong mga proposal, meron talagang mga masasagasaan. Which is relatable in what I always do.
And also, in general, you've been dealing with sectors that are historically, marginalized.
Exactly.
And you've been dealing with stories and narratives of inequality. So parang I would imagine na parang when you're doing the interviews, you're hearing their stories na parang, okay, gets mo na kung paano siya tahiin because you've been dealing with these stories, muscle memory na siya. And you know na, the usual characters na there are certain institutions that are perpetuating these inequalities, alam mo yung mga other sectors to interview para mas ma-deepen yung story, like talking to the wives of the fishermen, diba? And also trying to talk to the children kung kaya, and so on and so forth. So basically, we came out with a 2-part story on sardine fishing. Tapos meron on basically small fishermen versus commercial fishers, and then a documentary about it, right? So we worked on that by the end of the year. Yan ang inaatupag natin even on our Christmas shifts, New Year shifts. And 2 issues na lumabas talaga is yung pag-implement ng vessel monitoring measures and the 15-kilometer boundary. So, when you're doing the interviews, when you're writing the stories, ano yung nakikita mong position dito ng fishermen sa dalawang issue na to? Are they at a disadvantage? Sino yung mga sectors na tingin mo mas makakatulong sa kanila para ma-implement yung monitoring measures for commercial fishers para sa kanila lang yung municipal water, sila lang yung pwede mag-fish doon, and so on and so forth.
So one of the questions that we really asked the fishermen was, nakakita ka na ba ng commercial fishers dito sa municipal waters ninyo? And actually, even in the pre-interviews, tinanong na namin yan eh. And most of them, they said no.
Okay.
So parang inisip namin, paano kaya yung approach natin dito? If since we know this na hindi naman nila nakikita yung threat. So how can they relate to this possible thing? But nakakapagsagot naman sila kahit hypothetical. So if we ask them kung sakaling papasukin yung mga commercial fishers dito sa municipal waters nyo, ano yung magiging pakiramdam mo? And most of them said really the similar things na kami yung masasagasaan, ngayon pa lang hindi na kami makahuli ng isda, paano pa kaya kung papasukin na sila? And it was also striking because it also depended on how strict the LGUs were going to be, or how they are rather. So, tinanong din namin yung LGUs, gaano ba kayo ka-strict dito sa pagpapasok or pagbabawal rather ng mga commercial fishers dito sa inyo? And most of them said na strict talaga sila. And you can see na totoong strict nga sila kasi sinasabi nga ng fishermen nila na hindi sila masyado nakakapagkita eh. But then, if you have that information, and the fishermen are already saying na wala silang mahuli ngayon pa lang, there's already that indication that there's overfishing here. Na ngayon pa lang, wala na silang mahuli. So, paano pa kaya yun agad? And For the LGUs naman, I think it's a good practice yung meron silang tinatawag na sabelans. So that's the LGU Alliance of the coastal towns that's near Northern Samar, or rather, the San Bernardino Strait in Northern Samar. So, parang doon, nakapag-sit-in din kami sa meeting with them. And then, doon din nila pinag-usapan yung anong gagawin natin para may ganitong proposal na papasukan sila, what are we gonna do about it? So, parang nag-meeting din sila para mag-come up ng resolution. And sinabi din ng conservation group na Oceana na it's one of the first LGU alliances, if I remember correctly, na gumawa ng ganito if you were to go through with it. So, for me, I think I saw that as a good practice na meron silang support system from the LGUs. And then, syempre, from the support, there's also the support from the rights groups, the ocean conservation groups like Oceana nga. And then, but then, syempre, these groups, hindi natin alam kung gaano ka lakas ang boses nila when it comes to public policy. You cover that, Iya, diba? Yung environmental defenders, gaano ba sila pinapakinggan? And
that's always like the question,
yes,
diba?
Yeah. So parang kahit na meron silang ganitong allies, hindi natin alam kung gaano ka effective or gaano kalakas yung magiging boses nila. And also kasi speaking from other sectors, mas madali din minsan makinig ang gobyerno sa mga commercial industries. Kasi sasabihin nila, it's good for our economy.
For food security, they give jobs, diba? They get the food that people eat. Right?
So it's a challenge. It's a universal challenge ng mga rights defenders, ng mga fisher folk, ng iba pang mga nasa ganitong sector. Na even if you have support, how much will the government listen to you?
Yeah, and on that note, kasama din sa story natin na President Marcos actually wants to amend the fisheries code, right? That's what he said during the SONA. Na, for the development, for the modernization of the whatever. But yung kinakatakot ng environmental groups ay yun nga, yung 15-kilometer boundary na for local fishermen lang ay bubuksan na for commercial fishers. So yun yung takot nila. But the thing is, President Marcos never said anything about it.
Right.
Gusto lang niyang i-amend yung fisheries code. So even for me, parang ako I'm left, so anong amendment, di ba? But yun yung napapag-usapan ng mga environmental groups na yun yung pinopropose. But we've yet to see like a public document.
Right.
And I'm afraid, nako, kung hindi to makita agad ng public or hindi siya ma-cover agad, hindi siya magawa ng story agad, maybe it would be too late na parang okay, nakasampa na sa yung amendment. Ito na yung amendment. Ito na yung proposed amendment. Because since last year, there are technical meetings in Congress na with BIFAR, na para mga briefings na about the fisheries code. Pero yun, yung mga ganung meeting kasi, it's not like the hearings that we cover in Congress na pwede natin, na publicly, na pwede for public, di ba? Na pwedeng pumasok yung media. So, yun, I think maybe sa SONA sa July, makikita natin kung ano mangyayari sa fisheries code, kung anong progress or whatever. Pero,
sorry, and on that note din, kasi diba, yun nga parang nung una kong nakita yung SONA snippet ni President Marcos na sinabi niya, gusto nga niyang i-amend yung fisheries code. Wala naman siyang explicitly sinabi na, gusto ko papasukin yung mga commercial dun sa...
Well, he won't say it.
Diba? He won't say it, and he didn't say it. Yeah. But parang nakita ko din na the fact that the environmental groups were bringing up that this is what's likely to happen. Diba? They're not gonna say that for no reason.
Yeah.
So, parang it's baka yun yung iisipin mong likely na mangyayari. Yeah, yun lang.
Yun. Yeah, and I don't know if parang nakakatakot ba siya isipin na yung newly installed na DHE. Lagi ko sinasabi newly, pero last year pa naman, mga November pa, newly installed ay fishing tycoon. So, I don't know how that would roll out.
Daming layers.
Yeah. So more than that, meron din kayong na-meet on field na kinda in the middle. Meron kayong na-interview na ang business sila ay post-processing ng sardines, right? Dun sa that part of the industry. So they're not big fishers per se, they're not small fishers per se. Nasa in the happy middle sila. So when you met them, when you interviewed them, how did that inform or maybe kind of change your perspective on how you're going to write it? Kasi parang I would guess na parang going into there, syempre meron ka ng outline of how you would want to tell the story. Parang familiar ka naman na nakapag pre-interview ka na, you know what they're going through, their struggles, their challenges. So, meron nang na-form na story sa utak mo. Pero nung na-meet mo these business owners, parang, did that change anything? Parang, how did that change your approach into the story?
Yeah, so it was a challenge talaga kasi yun nga parang we did a lot of pre-interviews pero itong yung may-ari ng post-processing facility, hindi namin na pre-interview. It was just an idea from another source na, pwede nyo itong i-interview kapag pumunta na kayo. We also watched a video na previous report about them or previous video output about them and nakita namin na parang mukhang silang citizens initiative. It looked like citizens came together to come up with this post-harvest facility para mas ma-manage ng maayos yung sardine supply sa Northern Samar. So, yun, nag-prepare ako ng questions na assuming na...
With that in mind,
Yes,
right?
with that in mind. And then, syempre, nung pumunta na kami sa kanila, doon na kami nakapag-pre-interview talaga. And then, doon namin nalaman na ay hindi ito people's initiative. So we had to think on our feet. We had to figure out paano namin i-navigate to. Kasi one of the things was nung nagsiset na kami ng interview place, sabi, doon tayo sa cockpit. I'm like, bakit tayo pupunta ng cockpit? Okay. Tapos doon namin nalaman na business owners sila, not just of the post-harvest industry, but they also had a sabungan business. Okay. They also had a catering business. So parang doon mo makikita na these people that we're going to interview might have different interests as well, and might not be, completely in line with what we thought that they were going to be. So nakapag regroup kami, we thought of new questions to ask, and syempre ako I didn't want to demonize this source agad, diba? So I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. Ano ba talaga yung kwento nila? So nag-start ako with the personal story. It's a couple that owns the post-harvest facility. So nag-start ako sa personal kwento ng babae, yung the wife of the couple. Tapos nagkwento siya ng laki siya sa hirap. She had big dreams nung bata pa lang siya. She wanted to own a business. Nothing wrong with that at all, diba? So she just wanted to make a name for herself. Business-minded pa lang siya nung bata pa lang siya. And then, yun nga, she met her husband na mga business people din yung family nila. So, doon talaga nag-flourish yung business nila. And then, habang nagkakwentuhan kami, nagkwento siya na yung mga nagiging clients niya or mas nabibigyan niya ng business, yung mga commercial fishers. So, she had clients of both municipal and commercial fishers, but she has more, or she's able to make more money from the commercial fishers. And bukod pa doon, meron din silang sariling fishing boats. Okay. And those fishing boats were over 3 tonnage. Yeah. So that makes them commercial fishers. Yeah. So as in tinanong ko din siya diretso, so ma'am, considered commercial fisher po kayo, no? Yeah, sabi niya, yes, as in commercial boats yung meron sila. So ayun, parang they were commercial fishers, and they were giving more business to commercial fishers just like them, kahit na meron naman silang kinikater na municipal fishers rather. Tapos dumating ako sa point ng interview where I asked her, lumaki kayo sa hirap, na alam niyo yung na-experience ng mga small fisher folk. So meron ba kayong moral dilemma minsan na mas nabibigyan niyo ng negosyo yung mga malalaking business compared dito sa kanila, na smaller fishers na kababayan ninyo? And then, from her perspective, sinabi niya na, I don't think that I'm taking away anything from them kasi nabibigyan ko naman din sila ng business. And hindi naman siguro sila nawawala ng opportunity kapag binigyan ko din ng opportunity yung commercial. Which is her perspective. Pero diba, kapag you're the producer of the documentary, parang mas bibigyan mo ng nuance yung sinabi niya. And also, parang, ano din it's just also a realization na, syempre, anyone who's in poverty would like to escape poverty.
Yeah.
Minsan,
If given the chance,
yes,
right?
of course. And, di ba, minsan, hindi nila alam na sometimes yung mga papasukin nilang opportunities or sometimes yung mga pangarap nila ay makakaapi sa mga katulad nila.
Yeah.
Which is just a sad reality that we also had to nuance na hindi man sila small fisher, hindi man sila big fisher, kagaya ng mga large sardines brands, for example. But yun nga, nasa gitna sila and there's just a new perspective there to think about.
Yeah. And I think that showed in the writing of the stories kasi parang tinry din talaga nagbigyan ng nuanced perspective. Because, I don't know, for in general, how would I say this? Iba-iba pa rin yung ng oppression. Parang, you wouldn't say that they're oppressing the small fishers, right? Because they are giving them opportunities.
Yeah, and they're giving employment din naman.
It's just that it makes more business sense
Yeah.
to also cater to the fishers who have more resources.
Right.
I don't know, ano ba? It's a fact of life. It's so
Something
yeah.
to think about, diba?
Yeah, something to think about. Na, we can approach the story with a David Goliath narrative na small fishers versus big fishers. But there are also these entities, these businesses in between na kind of doing things a bit differently than what we would have expected going into the field. So it gives us a different perspective, a different take on the issue, or a more informed take, or a more mas buo yung picture, I guess, on our minds when doing the stories. So on that note, maybe you could tell us the process of writing the stories, of finally sitting down and then parsing through the transcripted interviews and making the script. Kasi you went there October, right? And then nagsimula tayo magsulat mga end of November, tas
siguro.
December, and then the script, yung documentary, lumabas siya on the last day of 2023. So, yeah, maybe you could tell us about that process.
Actually, it didn't necessarily start nung nag-start na tayo magsulat at the desk. Talagang, syempre kapag gumagawa ka ng docu, you have to imagine the docu while you're already there sa field.
Yeah.
So parang nung kinuwento ko kanina ng 3 a.m. na naglalakad kami sa dilim na wala kaming makita, parang dun ko na in-imagine na maybe I should bring our audience here.
Yeah.
Kasi yung tipong wala pa yung araw, ang dilim-dilim, lahat tulog pa, ang gising lang, mga mangingisda. And this is their normal routine. So, yung mga sounds na narinig ko, yung mga footsteps, yung mga asong tumatahol, rinig yun lahat sa docu, and that's how I imagined the first part of the docu. So I wanted to make it an immersive experience as well. So dun pa lang ini-imagine ko na siya. And then yun nga, apart from imagining it already from the field, napaisip din ako kung paano siya magiging more humanized. Kasi syempre, even though we have the angle, it's about the VMMs, it's about IUU. But if you start with that, diba, parang baka mabilis mawala yung audience mo kasi wala silang attachment. And when we watch documentaries, at least in my experience, parang nag-a-attach ako sa mga ini-interview.
Yeah, you want the character to root for, diba?
Exactly. So, in the first part of the docu, parang ginusto ko muna na mag-introduce ng mga characters. So there were 3 main characters that we chose, and they were from different towns, and we wanted to highlight how they were similar and also different.
Yeah.
One of the similarities that I really liked was 2 of them had experience living in Manila. And after that, parang kahit na na-experience nila yung buhay ng city, at may chance na baka mas mataas pa yung kinikita nila dito, may passion talaga sila for fishing, kaya umuwi sila ng Northern Samar. Yung isa nga, hindi taga Maynila na nga, nag-migrate pa sa Northern Samar just to pursue that dream. So, parang mas ma-attach ka sa characters natin if you understand na this is not just their livelihood, but it's their passion as well. So,
And it was their choice.
yes, it was their choice. And everyone has, diba, everyone should have the choice to pursue the things that they want. Gaano ka, kahirap yung salary niya or whatever. So, yun, I wanted to create that emotional connection ng pag-i-introduce ko sa kanila, yung usual araw nila bilang isang mangingisda. And then, so yun, after that introduction, dun ko na pinasok yung mga, or dun natin pinasok yung mga things from the news na ito yung pronouncement ni President Marcos, ito yung nangyayari, ito yung proposals.
The big picture. Right?
The big picture. And some would say also the unsexy part ng
It is.
ng docu. So, 'di ba? That's where we put it in, and then we brought it back. And kagaya ng sinabi ko na gusto ko sanang mag-lead up dun sa social justice angle. Dun ko nilagay si Sabellan's general manager na nagsabi ng where is the social justice if this happens to our fisher folk. So, 'di ba? Intro to the characters, and then you understand what the big picture is and how this big picture is going to affect these small people. So yun, yun yung parang thought process ko of how to make the docu.
Yung ano ko dun sa kinikwento mo, yung parang hearing the dogs bark, tapos the footsteps, hearing them, yun yung exciting sa field kasi even then, you're not writing anything down, but you're experiencing things out on the field. Para na-imagine mo na, okay, sa script, this is where I want this to go. This is, parang na-imagine mo na siya. Na-imagine mo na yung flow ng story, yung narrative. And then, sometimes when you hear, like, you're doing an interview, you're doing the usual rounds, tapos, like, you hear this soundbite na parang, okay, ayun yung ending ko. Diba? Parang, may mga ganon. Like, the story forms itself as we're doing the field work. So, these stories are not only just about fishermen's struggles. This is essentially about the food on our tables, on Filipinos' tables. So, essentially parang paano napupunta or ano yung pinagdadaanan ng pagkain na napupunta sa hapagkainan natin. When people read these stories, when people watch a documentary, if there's going to be like a single takeaway that you want them to have, what would it be?
I'll build up to that, the takeaway na.
Kasi Miss Universe question siya.
But yeah, we often, especially dito sa city, laging sinasabi na ang fishermen ay invisible sector. Diba, nakikita na lang natin yung mga isda nila, yung huli nila, pero hindi natin kilala or hindi natin nakikita kung sino yung humuhuli ng mga isda natin. And so, when we think about how this proposal might push through, and take this with a grain of salt kasi hindi naman ako expert dito. But I imagine na kapag halimbawa na pumasok na yung mga commercial fishers sa 15-kilometer municipal waters, initially we would see an abundance of food. Diba kasi the commercial fishers have the resources for mass production, for mass distribution. So initially we might see na marami ng isda sa market, mas marami ng mapapakain. But yun nga, when we go back to how the larger issue of overfishing, hindi natin alam kung gaano ka-sustainable yun. Yeah. But of course, I leave that to the experts. And also on that note, yung halimbawa meron ka nang nakikitang surplus in food. And kapag nakita mo na yung isda sa plato mo, iisipin mo ba na parang was it worth it na ma-risk yung livelihood ng isang mangingisda para lang makakain ako nito. Na yung fisherman din naman ay may kakayahan din kumain nito, pero yung gumawa ng trabaho ay mas advantaged in society. So, parang I guess yung takeaway dun is talagang iisipin mo talaga kung gaano ka-interconnected ang lahat. When you think about the food that we eat every single day, saan sila nagagaling? And when we have these policies, kahit maliit lang na policy, pwedeng umapekto sa mga humuhuli ng mga isda natin or kumukuha or nagsasource ng ating mga pagkain. So it's just a matter of being more mindful about our own food that we have every day and how certain policies will, even the smallest policies, may affect our marginalized sectors like the fisher folk.
And in the big picture, yun naman yung like one of the biggest ironies of life na the sectors, the people who feed us are those na hirap humanap ng pambili ng pagkain, na hirap mag-provide ng pagkain for their families, right? So yun. So, naku, hindi hopeful note yung But anyway, thanks Michelle for joining us for this episode. If you want to continue the conversation, download the Rappler Communities app on your phone and join the Climate Change channel. This app is available on iOS and Android. It's also accessible via desktop at communities.rappler.com. See you there. Bye!